Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 827. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what I need you to do. Tonight, we're taking a serious right turn, and we're going to go down a rabbit trail, so buckle in. But before going down that rabbit trail, I have to introduce my co-host. Of course, you know her, you love her, all the way on the right coast of America, nestled in our nation's capital, where she applies her skills as a master statistician, and the U.S. government would not work if she didn't show up to work on Monday morning. That's just it. It would be a government shutdown. You know her, you love her, the lovely, the redoubtable
Grace!
Grace, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Todd. I hope everybody's ready. Oh, that was it. She's gone.
She's gone.
She was just snuggling in there, and
yeah,
that was it. I spoke.
There goes Mikasa. Done. Podcast over.
I'm sure she'll be back.
Yeah.
I'm sure every cat will visit me during the course of this podcast.
I'm sure. Hey, did you enjoy the first race of the season?
I did, but it also feels like it was months ago.
It does, doesn't it?
2, I love how Ferrari is all over the Fred Vasseur, you failed us. Listen, I just want to put this out there. Ferrari fans, I'm a McLaren fan. What I find is very useful is just keep it medium low expectations.
Oh, I know.
Ferrari fans are we're up, we're down, we're up, we're down. Your season's been the same. It's been one race. Calm,
I know.
Deep breath, everybody. And I like it that it's the apparently, I guess I was reading, Fred Vasseur is being hamstrung by the CEO. What is this? Luca de Montezemolo 2.0. Nothing has changed at Ferrari. So Ferrari fans, take a deep breath. It's been one race. I
know it. Well, and I've as many listeners know, I've been a Ferrari fan, for my whole life. And yeah, and it is. I think maybe it's a little different for me because I've managed to check my expectations after 2017. So,
yes.
Or 2007, sorry. So yes, I have squarely put those in a box. They're in the basement right now with heavy objects on top of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is funny just to watch emergency meetings held between Charles Leclerc and executives and Fred Vasseur, and key members are leaving, and David Sanchez, and oh my gosh.
Everybody's leaving. I just think they're all going to go to Aston Martin. That's just the new thing. Everybody go there.
Everybody's going to go there. And then all this, Lewis's contract's up, and there's rumors he's going to go to Aston Martin. Oh, boy.
So basically,
that's part of the F1 fun.
After one race, basically, Fred Vasseur is Bonado, but out loud. He says things out loud that you're not supposed to, right?
Right.
That's the difference so far.
Yeah.
And I enjoy it. I'm here for this, right? Again, especially as a McLaren fan, I'm here for Ferrari. Just Fred, tell us whatever you want to tell us. I'm here for that. But
tell us more. Well, and it's to be fair, it's not like your team doesn't have a little controversy over there. You know, a lot of people wanting Zach out, and Lando's going to leave, and there's lots of drama over there. And the other thing is it's one race, folks.
I also think, if I had friends who would say to me, Grace, what's up with McLaren? Which none of my friends watch Formula One, so that's not going to happen in everyday conversation. But my response would definitely be, I don't know, that Petty Award guy seems to be doing pretty good. I just keep it all Indy where they seem to be having some success. Right. Just hope nobody notices Formula One. Right.
Right. No, that's good. Yeah, it's just one race. It's a very particular track, and everybody, oh my gosh, Red Bull's going to win every race, and
the teeth gnashing is just so. I just was like, yo, Italy, all of you collectively, do some square breaths, and we'll see you next week. Ooh, calm down.
Right. Yeah. Just everybody, calm down. It's one race in the season.
As we talked about,
change your effing car.
Like we talked. It's great. We use that all the time, right? But I think that why they just you totally threw me. Now I totally lost my thought. But anyway, I think they all just need to
change your car. Checo's been saying the car's up. Right.
But they just need to give it a break. They should have a conversation, right? Charles Leclerc has every reason to be angry and need a conversation, but everybody else, I know what I was going to say. like we talked about, whatever podcast I was on last 3 weeks ago, F1 is the opposite of any given Sunday, whatever you call that. So again, any given Sunday, it was one race.
Just one race.
We'll talk about it in like 5 or 6 races.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Then, you know, fire,
then we can arm
panic.
wave.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you know, after 5 or 6 races, if it looks the same, then
Mass hysteria.
you know, it's going to be
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, Grace, I had
Ferrari and McLaren fans recording a podcast together.
Who knew? Who knew? I know that's the other magic of it is that you're a McLaren fan, I'm Ferrari, and we have so much fun together.
I mean, trash talk is part of the fun of sports. I watch things like I watched like 3 seasons of The Voice. Why? Because I had a coworker that watched it and we trash talked each other about it. I have no interest in The Voice. I could care less. And as soon as we weren't working together anymore, I never watched it again. But I will watch anything for some trash talk.
Yeah, that's part of the fun.
Yeah,
fun. So I had some time this past week, and well, first, and let me tell you, I come by this, I mean, honestly. So I have 2 daughters. They're younger, and Gen Z. And so one of them said, "Hey, Dad, you know, you got a TikTok account. You should post some videos on there." And I said, "I know, man. It's just, you know, that, you know, it's limited time and all that." And they were like, "Yeah, but F1's really big on TikTok right now. And, you know, everybody's talking about it." And I thought, well, you know, maybe I should. So I went and posted a few videos, you know, that a few people liked. And I posted a few videos, and then I got to going down that rabbit trail. And I thought, wow, is that the kind of content on TikTok that's over on Instagram? Because predominantly Instagram's more millennial, you know, than, not that Gen Z isn't there, of course they are too, but then TikTok is, you know, a lot of Gen Z. So
yeah, I had a Friendster account, whatever.
Yeah, right. We had a MySpace account.
Right. Oh, I for sure had a MySpace account.
Yeah. Tom was our friend. Right? Yeah. So then I got going down this rabbit trail of all of this consternation, for lack of a better term, between what I'm going to refer to as Drive to Survive fans. So these would be new F1 fans that came to F1 via Drive to Survive. So we'll just call them DTS fans, right? And there's a lot of DTS fans, and they were posting all of these posts about the inappropriate behavior and being mistreated by all the veterans, and they were talking about F1 gatekeeping and all this stuff. And so I started going down, and they said, "Oh, and all these negative comments I got on this such post." And I would go look at that post, and I'd go in the comments, and there'd be 120 comments, and I'd go through all of them, and I'd look for all these negative comments and everything. And so as I went down this rabbit trail, I thought, you know, this is a topic that I think would be interesting to talk about, because I would love to know what our listeners and viewers think about this topic, more so than what you and I think. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight.
Isn't that why they're here, though?
Kind of.
To hear what I have to say about these topics?
Yes, they don't care what I have to say about it, but yes.
Why are they listening?
Let me just say up front that Grace has tons more fans than I do from this podcast. I mean, it's almost to the point where she can't go to restaurants without being recognized.
Listen, as long as we all have more fans than Paul, that's all that matters.
Yeah, well, I don't know. That may have been the case, but now that he's won the 24 Hours of Daytona, I think we're overshined. But anyway, outshined. So anyway, I wanted to talk about this rabbit trail this past week and all the posts and comments by content creators about F1, and in particular new fans or DTS fans, women and who have become fans, and veterans, right? So I just kind of broke it down to initial observations, and just so in this podcast we're talking about 3 categories mainly. The first one is DTS or new fans. Second one is veteran fan reactions to all the new fans. And then finally, female F1 fans that have come to the sport via DTS. So I thought in order to start the discussion or conversation, the best thing might be to go, since there are so many new fans, for you veterans, this is going to be a walk through memory lane. So if you'll please, yeah, just indulge me, guys. I know you guys have been here, since podcast 80 or something, and this is like, oh my gosh, not the origin story again. First, the Earth's crust cooled, and then the dinosaurs came. Yeah, we've heard this 1,000 times. Anyway, but for all the newer fans or DTS fans that don't know, I thought, well, it may be worth revisiting. So the Parc Fermé started back in 2005. All right. And it was created as a safe harbor. Get this. This is going to blow your mind. The whole reason I started the Parc Fermé, which at that time was called Formula1blog.com, but the whole reason I started that is to create a safe harbor for new fans, because I was very unhappy with the way that veteran fans were treating them. And I still am. All right. So I started this website, Formula1blog.com, which later became the Parc Fermé. And I was posting a bunch of crap about Formula One. And one of the very first posters that posted a comment on one of the things I posted was Grace. Back in 2005. Yes,
Oh my
lovely
gosh,
Grace.
I sure did.
And she was the first one. And she was like, dude, you're an idiot. Learn about Formula One. No, you didn't.
Never said that.
No, you didn't. And we started having great dialogues back and forth in the comments section, right? And
because this was back in the day of message boards, right?
Yes.
Like that was the only way you
forums,
communicate.
right?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And so I would be on message board, and it's all in America, right? It was definitely all NASCAR fans. So the second you would say, I have a question about Formula One, and then somebody would be like, well, that's dumb. Why don't you watch Darlington? I don't read my post. I specifically said, I'm interested in Formula One. I have a question about Formula One. The title is Formula One. I don't care about NASCAR. Why are you hating on me about this? Like,
I know.
There's so much like NASCAR trollerism. And I was just like, your news is over here, right? Like, this is your part of the message board.
Yeah.
Troll us
I'm
all
in the
you
Formula
want
One.
over there.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm not going there, but don't
Right.
be trolling me on my. So that was really the crux of, what annoyed me was that it was hard enough to find Formula One news in America all those years ago as it was.
I know.
And then it was just like, anytime you just ask like, hey, why is this thing important? Somebody would be like, well, it's not NASCAR. We don't care. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Super helpful. Thanks.
And I've been watching it for decades, and I would go into forums and I'd post something and they would equate, because I just created an account, like an auto sports forum back in the day.
Yeah.
And I just created an account, so my post count was real low, and they equated that as your knowledge of Formula One. So if I only had 100 comments in the forum, they thought I didn't know crap. Never mind, I've been watching since 1972, but whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got tired of all that nonsense. To me, somebody needed to embrace the new fans of the sport and provide a safe harbor. And so we did that. So we created that. Our podcasting started in 2007. We have well over 900 episodes, and Grace has been there from the very beginning and soon after Paul joined. So Grace has always been, a part of that. Now, we established at the website one simple rule: decorum and civility. That means share your opinion, disagree all you want, but no personal attacks. And I got to be honest with you, our readers, posters, fans, they kind of police that for us. We don't even have to police that anymore. If somebody gets out of line, one of the other listeners or readers will say, hey, that's not how we roll here. No personal attacks. Get lost. Go find a different website that you control and slam and personally attack people, because we don't do that here. And that's a testament to the listeners. They're awesome. So we had that one rule. Now, we've never really changed from that, which means that's what gave us someone who wrote a review of us. One of the very, very first reviews of our podcast way back then said,
always entertaining, occasionally insightful.
Always entertaining and occasionally insightful. So that's become our moniker, which we're
Yes.
occasionally insightful. And that's all we are.
That's
We don't
all I promise.
Yeah, we don't promise to be more than occasionally insightful. So
Who am I? Scott Mitchell mom? I don't think so. We're only
No.
occasionally insightful, right?
No, I didn't get Mitchell mommed this whole week. Didn't read anything he wrote. Whatever. So we've worked with many of the teams, the drivers, the sponsors over the years, did approximately 80, 85 interviews with some of the sport's biggest luminaries. In short, we've been creating content before there was even a thing such as content creators and influencers.
Yeah.
All right. We've been doing this for 16 years podcasting, and longer than that, 18 years as a website. So the point is, we've seen the evolution of Formula One. And in Grace's case, since 2000, that's when she became a Formula One and a fan. And in my case, it was the early 70s. Now, I was a very, very young boy, just out of diapers, but I've watched it ever since. So that's our story. Now, what I see now is, to be honest with you, unprecedented, and yet in some ways concerning, to say the least. But I went through this whole rabbit trail this weekend as a Gen Xer, it seems that this kind of just seems par for the course, but it always seems like whatever millennials and Gen Z go to war over something, there's usually just a lot of collateral damage, you know? And so I'm looking at all these conflicts between the two generations and all the, you know, the haterade and everything. And so I got to thinking about it, and I thought, all right, so I read a lot and listened to a lot over this past week. To be honest with you, more than I wanted to. But I did this for our listeners.
They should never leave you alone again. That's what I'm taking away from the first 5 minutes of this show.
I know. My wife and daughters have been out of town all week. So anyway. So let's start off with DTS and new fans, or what I'll use them interchangeably. DTS fans means new fans who came to Formula One by DTS. There's no doubt that DTS has brought a phalanx of new fans. And overall, I think that's a great thing. More eyeballs means more coverage, extended coverage, which is good news for veterans and new fans, right? More sponsors, more focus, more opportunities for folks to work in F1, a bigger industry. Mm-hmm. It's a knock-on effect. And it's that old adage, Grace, that, rising tide raises all ships, right? And so it's a good thing.
I don't have to cringe every time I see Formula One on the bottom of ESPN's Chiron, like, oh my God, please don't be terrible. And then it's just like, Lewis Hamilton said, I'm going to sign another contract.
Yeah.
It was like,
scandal?
Right.
Wow.
Like, oh my gosh. Right. Yes. Because it used to always be either somebody died, unfortunately, or some scandal, unfortunately. Right. And so you always, so when you just saw, because like ESPN always like pops up the sport, and then you kind of have to wait till it catches up to your sport. And you're like, oh God, Formula One, please don't be terrible. So I definitely see that. It's not, I forget to cringe now. It's been so long that
right.
It's
now
just like normal news, right?
It's normal news, right? Yeah, that's great. It's also brought in, I would say, DTS has brought in what I would call just general sports fans, right? And some of those, some of them are hooligan behavior, no doubt about that. But let's be fair, some of that behavior already existed in the sport, right? Sure. And it's kind of a numbers game. The more fans you bring a higher, a chance for a higher percentage of more inappropriate behavior and inappropriate people, period, right? And it's kind of like, I was born and raised in Kansas City, and every Thanksgiving that evening, there's a place called the Plaza with all these outdoor shopping, and they have all these lights that they light up on Thanksgiving. And my friends are always like, hey, man, they're doing the lights. Let's go down to the Plaza and watch them turn on all the Christmas lights and everything. There's going to be 280,000 people down there. No.
I'm good.
That's 280,000 people significantly raises the percentage chance of crazies, right?
Yes.
So I don't want to be around that. I'm not good with big, like, biomass. So anyway, when you have a whole phalanx of fans coming from all corners of the earth by Drive Survive, some are casual orbiting F1. They're just general sports fans, and there's a lot of, you're rolling the dice there, right? There's even some famous people now. They're looking to cash in on the F1 hype train, right? Instantly they've got podcasts because, they're famous and they watch Drive Survive and they see Formula One exploding. So they're going to marry their newfound love with F1 with their famous position and start a podcast. And there you go. And they'll get on there and wax poetic, almost as if the series had just been discovered, I would say.
Yes.
And they position their commentary with a lot of personality, a lot of bravado, you know, the Delphic Oracle shepherding all these new fans into the sport thanks to Google. So there's those. Conversely, you have veteran fans who sat in the stands at Watkins Glen and don't need a Google search to tell you the desperation the crowd felt and sorrow back in 1973, right?
Right.
And if you don't know, Google it. It's the difference between Google knowledge and lived experience. And we're all on that spectrum at some point or at some level regarding the history of anything, aren't we?
Yeah.
You know,
Every friend started as a stranger. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So we're all at some point on the timeline, graphed to that timeline at a certain point. Look, I may have lived through Senna taking Prost out at turn 1, which I did, while a new fan didn't. They Googled it. And while I may have a much stronger emotional attachment to that incident, the result is still the same. Senna took Prost out, right? And so those new fans will they'll begin building that lived experience from the inflection point that they got attached to the sport. So if they join the sport in 2020, say Abu Dhabi was a very real experience for them in 2021, right? They lived that experience. It's different than reading about it, but when they were on their edge of the seat, it's a different thing, right? And that's what you have a lot. There was a young woman, a viral video that was going around social media that I happened to see of a young woman, either in the paddock, I think, and Sebastian Vettel was going by and she was either getting his autograph and she was so excited to see him. And she goes, "Oh my God, Sebastian." She goes, "I remember you from Ferrari days." And everybody just dogpiled her, Ferrari days, what an idiot. And I was thinking, oh, come on, man, that's not fair. Yeah, she wasn't watching when he had 4 world championships at Red Bull. Clearly, her inflection point when she graphed to the F1 timeline was during Ferrari when Seb was banging wheels with Lewis at Baku, right? That's her. That's when her lived experience. Think of it, children, right? So, it's that kind of stuff that I agree that's just unfortunate about social media. She was genuinely excited to meet him. She had been watching him when she got into F1 at Ferrari, and that's not fair. So it's that kind of stuff that you see about the new fans, and there's people that remember Schumacher as a Ferrari guy, right? Well, he was a Benetton guy before that.
Right.
2 championships at Benetton, but they didn't get in the sport until the Ferrari days. They may have gotten into the sport because of Schumacher and Ferrari winning.
I wonder what days Eddie Jordan remembers him at.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So it just depends on that perspective, I think, in a lot of ways.
I think a lot of people, anyway, but I have also seen, I don't know, there's some part of me that people are always like that. Men, especially towards women, when it comes to sports, are like that. I mean, I remember the first time I went to the Canadian Grand Prix, and I'm trying hard, like these people, I'm there with friends, right? There's these guys sitting next to us at the bar, and they're just like wrong. And I'm like, you're not in their conversation, Grace. Keep to yourself. You're not. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. And I said, and I just remember it was about Nico Rosberg. This is when he was still at Williams. And I was like, and I said something, and they just looked at me stunned. They're like, "Oh, you actually know something." I'm like, "Oh my God, you're right. I spent all this money to go to a race because they're expensive, fly all the way up to Canada just to look cute. You're right. I might know something." Right. So I think there's plenty, I guess I don't want to make this too much like men be like, women be like, because I don't know that serves us either. But there is definitely a component of men be like, women be like, and how men especially try to gatekeep against women in sports, and that they hold women to a much higher level of knowledge, but not too much knowledge about sports that men don't ever have to deal with. I think I mentioned this before. There was a Canadian comedy sketch where the guy invites the girl out to go to the hockey game. And before she's like with her female roommate, like, what do I wear? And she like tries on different things and she tries on jerseys and she's like, what do I make my hair look like? And then her roommate's quizzing her, like, does she have enough hockey knowledge or too much hockey knowledge because she can't know more than him? And then they cut to the guys and his male roommate's like, so you like going to the game? He's like, I like drinking beer. Right. She can't just say, I go to the game because I like to drink beer and I like to watch guys skate up and down the court. But he can say that. And nobody is critical of him saying that. But if she had said that, I would have been a whole different thing. So yeah. I do think for sure. And I do think that's what happens to new fans as well, right? This whole idea of like, you somehow have to prove yourself. I don't know. I guess I'm old now. And so it's nice that I don't have to all the time do that. I used to, when I went to work, I used to carry my research with me because I got tired of meetings. People like, well, why should we listen to you? Well, I don't know if you've seen this, but you might want to look at the authors, right? Like maybe I have some knowledge that I walk into this and just because I look the way I look and you don't think that I have that knowledge. So I do think new fans get that too.
I do too. Yeah, I do too. And look, and I do think, there is a component of men be like, women be like, I mean, not from me, because if that was true with me, I wouldn't have been doing a podcast with you for 16 years. If I had an issue with women in sports and knowing things about sports, I think it's awesome. I'm all for it. And it's terrific. And you and I have had the best of times for 16 years doing a podcast and talking about it from a guy's perspective and from a woman's perspective. And
I do want to say though, much like all bi, I don't mean this about you, but like a lot of it's unconscious. So I think if you said to many men, do you treat women like this when it comes to sports? They'd go, no, I don't. And then they turn around and do it because it becomes so ingrained. It's like common sense, right? That's how unconscious bias works. So I'm just saying that we all carry unconscious bias against other groups, other people. And so for sure, men may say, well, I don't do that. My friends don't do that. So it must not happen. It does happen. And one may perpetrate that and just not realize it.
Yeah, maybe. Although I think I'm pretty in tune with that. I
think we all just have the space for that. Again, I realized that in following that statement up to what you just said makes it sound like I'm countering you, and it wasn't. It's just what you said reminded me of saying that. I just wanted to kind of put that out there that I do it. You do. All people have unconscious bias, and so that's some part of this as well when we interact with other groups.
Right. I will say that what's interesting is the new fan and the veteran fan reaction, or the DTS fan reaction to the veteran fan, or the veteran fan reaction around this. Again, the reason I started this site was due to a lack of a safe harbor for new fans and the pathetic behavior of veteran fans were displaying with the new fans. And I know that exists because that's the reason we exist. Right. So that was happening long before DTS ever came. So if you're a DTS fan, don't feel like you're singular in that sense, because there were veteran fans lording over new fans for years.
It just wasn't to our face.
No. And because of social media, it wasn't so brazen and troll-like and that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And you would have to specifically go to like a forum or those kind of things to get that behavior. Whereas now you just open Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or Snap or whatever, and you just see it there.
Although I do also think sometimes people are very, very nice about things. Like somebody very innocently asked, why are there two people named Carlos Sainz on the grid? And somebody was like, that's his dad, yo. And it was just like, everybody was like, oh, that's hilarious. That, I mean, there was no like vitriol towards this person. Like, you're an idiot. That's his dad. It was just really very funny. Like, oh yeah, people wonder these things that I like. Yeah. I also know Carlos Sainz Sr. as a person, as a WRC driver. Like, so to me, the idea that, of course, that's his son never crossed my mind, that some people don't have that connection that I have, because I know both of them as as race car drivers.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know. I guess I just don't. I don't know. Maybe I just don't spend enough time on social media. I also
Well,
do.
I don't.
I also think that Drive to Survive is going to come full circle, and I think we'll see what they're on season 5. They just finished season 5. So I think when they're now at a point where they can reference past events and use their own footage, you know what I mean? Like they don't have to. So I think we'll see how many if people. We all came. I think this is part of the point you're making, right? We all came in somehow, whether it's a friend, a parent, a billboard, somehow you got into this sport, right?
Yep.
And so what you'll find is if it sticks, right? Like, so you might, like, I got into this because of an ex-boyfriend and it stuck, right? Even after we broke up, I still watch the sport. I haven't talked to that guy in 25 years, right?
Yeah.
So the same thing will happen with Drive to Survive. There'll be people that will get into the sport and start watching it, and that'll go away, and then it'll stick.
It will. And
that isn't real. It's a painting, not a photograph. It's very entertaining.
It was a catalyst that brought them to the sport, but they're anchored in the sport now.
Yeah. And so I think that, and especially because it highlights, I think this last season too, they really kind of struggled to find conflicts that didn't exist. Like they tried to make Lando seem like a bad guy. Like they couldn't even create that narrative. Like,
and they kind of made Oscar seem like kind of a bad guy.
Yeah.
You know?
Like there's one bad guy, Christian Horner. There's one funny guy that swears a lot and only calls Gene, and that's Gunther, right? Like, I just think, why don't they just have their own spin-off show? Because that I'd watch. I would just watch Gunther calling Gene all the time. Gene, I need to go to the grocery store. Do you need anything? Right?
Yeah.
Like, but so I think that's the thing, is that now it's existed enough that we'll kind of see, you know, if it sticks, if people, which is what you hope that they get into it by whatever means they do. And then they go, oh, okay, so that wasn't quite how it is. And I'll keep watching it. And then some people are like, nah, I only, like I've said before, I have a good friend. She'll go to every race car movie I make her go to, but she'll never watch a race. Why? Because movies are great. Because it's 2 hours and they only show you the highlights, and, you know, they don't make you sit through 22 boring races every season. It's just the highlights across 10 years. She'll watch that. Yeah. So.
And I think it's and when we've talked about DTS in the past, I said it was, the interesting thing will be to see if it has stickiness, right?
Right.
When it wanes, will it have stickiness and keep the fans engaged in the sport, or will their interest wane as DTS does, right?
And I think we're kind of there. I think this
I think we're getting close.
It's kind of like they're running out of like novelty, right? There's like not
some of the helium's out of that balloon.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So this kind of you know, negativity and veterans and all, it still exists at some level. It's unfortunate because because the new fans are really the lifeblood of the sport going forward. Sure, the sport existed before them, of course, but the influx of new fans represents that tide raising all ships, right?
Right.
And so Formula One's very keen to not only entice and compel DTS to bring new fans, but it's up to them to retain them, right? And so that's going to be important. Now, having said all that, I say, I will say that the amount of harsh comments and messages I get has increased since DTS, and they're not coming from veterans. They're coming from new fans. And sure, I got these before Drive Survive, but the number that I receive now has increased because of DTS. Go back to my comment about when you increase a huge fan base, you're going to get an increase in just inappropriate behavior and hooligan behavior. So, that's partly, I'm sure, part of it. This led me to watch several posts from what we'll call DTS fans, new fans, about all of these sort of hate messages and comments they got. And I was going through and I was watching these TikToks and I was watching these Instagram, what do they call those, reels or whatever they call them. And so all these people were coming on and saying, oh my gosh, and they were clearly DTS fans, and they were outraged by the kind of haterade they were getting from veterans and all that kind of stuff. and they would say, you know, I did a video, blah, 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 and the comments are ridiculous and blah, blah. Well, then I decided, well, I'm going to look into that. So, you know, there was a lot of bitterness and angriness on these posts by these DTS fans about it. So I said, okay, so I scoured the comments, and occasionally I'd find one or two, but listening to them, you'd believe that it was an all-out assault, like by a factor of 1,000 or 2,000. I found maybe a couple comments that were slightly gray, but yeah, I wasn't sure. And in fact, most of the comments on those posts were from other DTS fans agreeing with them and saying, yay, this, yes. They're all agreeing with them. And they themselves were being outraged by negative comments. Presumably they couldn't find either, because I couldn't find them on there. So I thought that was kind of strange. And I wondered where those comments were. You know, maybe they deleted them. I don't know. But I did see one person share what they said was a negative comment. And I thought this was interesting because I did see several of these kind of comments, and I think it's contextual, but I did see a person share a negative comment, and it was from a veteran fan who was saying, hey, you know, great that you're, you know, becoming an F1 fan, really enjoying it. And I'd really recommend taking a deep dive into its history and maybe to start maybe here, this issue and this event and that event, right? Now, the host was absolutely outraged by that and said that was like F1 gatekeeping and all of this stuff. Yeah, I guess so. I think that's context. I'm not sure. I've had lots of folks recommend topics for me in F1. And I've enjoyed reading about them, whether they were events prior to me becoming an F1 fan or even after. So I'm wondering if some of this is down to context. One person's hate might be another person's opinion or guidance. I don't know. But I did see some of that, you know, and I don't know, you know, there's a fine line, I guess, there. Not to beat a dead horse, but I think there's a fine line. I mean, heck, Grace and Paul have both recommended things to me that I either completely missed or I forgot, which is very, very likely that I forgot about it. And I appreciate that. I don't take offense with that, but to each their own. But I'm not, one thing about the veterans, I'm not saying that there isn't veteran boorishness there. It certainly does exist, for veterans trying to be gatekeepers of F1. I saw that back in 2005 and I see that now. And like I said, I looked a lot deeper into several DTS fan creator accounts, which post incessantly, you know, that they're being abused by veteran fans. And I was looking for those comments and, yeah, I'm not seeing them. I can't find a lot of them. Some of them are, yes, they were there. Some I see a lot of adulation for their condemnation of it, from other DTS fans. But they were there, but maybe I just didn't look in the right places, maybe, to be fair. That's entirely possible. Or maybe they deleted them. That's entirely possible. I will say, though, Grace, that the behavior of some new fans on our platforms has made me wonder if we aren't becoming sort of a safe harbor for veterans from new fans, to be honest. But I think that's because new fans, I think there's probably a couple reasons for that. Number one is we've had this sort of complete decorum and civility vibe all along, right? So whenever veteran fans are here, there's no personal attacks and that kind of thing. And so we've always kind of had that understanding. So when I get some negative comments from DTS fans, I'm kind of thinking that maybe I'm trying to have deference for them here. I'm thinking maybe that's because their experience as becoming a new fan of Formula One with veteran gatekeepers and harsh comments, when they come into our place, they figure they got to come in, go both guns blazing, because that's all they've experienced, right? So they come in and, you know, and they're already defensive and, you know, shoot first, aim second, right? And so maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But do you see some of that from veteran fan to new fan? What have you experienced?
I mean, I think that Okay. So first of all, I think one of the things is, to me, I'm very social media is output only. Like
Mhm.
I really don't I mean, I do have conversations with people or like the F1 chat, but if somebody comes at me and is just like, I hate that your room is green and you have sharks hanging on it, I'm like, okay, and I move on, right? Like to me, it's output only, and we can talk about, you know, the latest Gordon Ramsay cooking show, or we can talk about how sad I am as a McLaren fan, but that's not personal. The second it becomes like I hate you for something you did, I'm like, this is a one-way conversation.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
output only. I find no joy in that. I don't find, but that's true also in my personal life. You know, I think that I will, if you came to me and said, you know, which we've had these conversations, you'll come to me and you'll say, Grace, I just don't understand X. And I'll go, okay, well, let's talk about this. And I'll say something and you'll say something. That's called a conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And at the end, I'll go, you're right, Todd. I never thought of it that way. And you'll go, that's right, Grace. I never thought of it that way. And we have growth.
It's discourse.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. I will talk to anybody about anything, but the second it's just to, you know, win one over on me or try to prove that you're smarter than me or just to be a troll or just to dig at me, I have no time for that. And I have literally like gone back and forth with people and then I go, oh, you're not really interested in this topic. You just think it's fun to torment me. I'm good. I'm just going to walk away. So I think my use of social media is very much how I am in real life. Like if you really want to have a conversation on social media, I'm all for that. We all have different, that's community, right? That's discourse. That's why we're people with other people. And so I can say to you, you have a different experience than I do. So let's talk about that. But if it's just for you can, you know, make me feel bad about myself, I'm good. I don't need any help with that. And I don't need to be a part of this conversation, whether it's virtual or with a real person. So
yeah,
I just had to kind of work my way through that I just, you know, whatever. I'm just here for the like cute animal pictures and how old your kids are getting. I'm really not here for all this other stuff.
Yeah. And I think, you know, there's been an occasion here or there over the last, 18 years, but, you know, by and large, I think a lot of your F1 outlet anyway is associated with Parc Fermé and the podcast and those kind of things. You know, there again, it's all based on one rule, decorum and civility. And I think that's where we have this discourse of somebody saw the driver bracket video that I posted on our Facebook group. And it was a veteran. And he didn't know that the bracket chooses the drivers for you and you just have to select which one. And he said, wow, you know, you put Ascari over Fangio. And he goes, that's crazy, you know? And I was like, no, that, and I had explained, I said, no, I wouldn't do that. Fangio, of course I would have picked over Ascari. I love Ascari, but I would pick Fangio, but they provide the drivers. I don't get to select which drivers I see. And he didn't know that, you know, we could have got in sideways with each other. And, you know, I said, oh, there's a veteran, you know, cause he literally had been to Argentinian races and seen Fangio drive. So he was an older gentleman.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
No,
being
that's
able
crazy.
to see Fangio drive.
That's
cool.
crazy.
How cool was
that's
that?
Great.
You know?
Yeah.
So I love it that, you know, he didn't know. And that's okay, man. And we had a conversation and then, you know, I said, oh, of course and then I explained it, told him that of course I would have picked Fangio in that case. And I said, they didn't offer Jim Clark or he would have been at the top of my brackets, you know, and he said, oh, the Flying Scot, you know, I saw him race. Yeah. So it's so cool, but those are the kind of interactions we should be having, right?
Yeah.
Not the with veterans, you know, this guy's clearly more of a veteran F1 fan than I am. He's been watching since Fangio. It's 50 years, folks.
I know, right?
Or more, 60. So anyway, and the other thing I noticed as I got into TikTok in particular, but Instagram as well, was the influx of female F1 fans. And another thing I found, I just found that interesting, the influx of female F1 fan podcasts or just content creators, right? Be it on the social media or TikTok or Instagram. And I think that's awesome. And it's a great thing. And as far as content and podcasts, and perhaps, Grace, I'll hold you up, as you should be a good reminder, because you're one of the OGs of women in F1 podcasting. You've been podcasting about F1 for 16 years, right? But as far as content and podcasts, that women do love F1 and motorsport in general. You're living proof, and you've been an F1 podcaster for 16 years about it.
So two things. First of all, I do think it's funny whenever Flip is on some form of social media and they're like, man, you're so lucky your wife's into Formula One. And he's like, she got me into this. Like, I get the same thing because people always think I'm the one that had the cats. No, he had the cat. Right. And then we got more cats, but he started this. Right. So I do think it's funny how, again, our unconscious bias play into this, that they assume that he was a Formula One fan and I'm just along for the ride. And that's really not what happened. But I do think what is interesting, and so now I'm going to step out to the larger sports world and then come back to Formula One. One of the criticism that women often get in the realm of sports, even if you're, an ESPN commentator, you're that caliber of a professional, is that women never played football. So how can you have any space in NFL? How can you have any commentary? How can you have any knowledge? How can you be like the ultimate gatekeeper because you never played the sport? So how can you know? One of the things is that I've never experienced that in Formula One because none of you have played this sport.
Right.
And so I think that makes it a very interesting sport to be female in, because if anybody's like, well, what do you know? You've never driven a Formula One car. Yeah, shut up, neither of you, because there's only like 60 people alive who've done it or something like that, right? Like it's 100 people. It's a really small group of people that have done it. Unlike football where, every guy's, played it in their backyard at a minimum, or, some rec league game. And so I do think that part of it can't be gatekeeped in the way that a lot of other sports are, because you can't tell me I didn't do something because you didn't either. You have Todd, have as much experience in Formula One as I, Grace, do, right?
Right. Not driven in it.
Right. And so, and then I think it's a sport that many of us for a long time are fans without ever going to a race, or if you do go to a race, it's such a sacred thing, or such a minimal thing. It's rare. It's I was like, what word am I looking for? It's such a rare event, right?
Right.
Because even in the course of a season, so now we're up to 23 races.
Yep.
Even if you go to one race a year, that's still so much smaller than going to a baseball game or going to a hockey game or you know what I mean? Like, because there's only one race, one weekend for 23 weekends, and you've got to fork over the money to go do it, let alone go to this, wherever it is and something like that. So there are a lot of people also who are content creators and have podcasts. I certainly had a podcast a long time before I ever went to a race.
Right.
So I think that's not I don't know that that's true, actually. Because wasn't Indianapolis when was Indianapolis? Because I went to those races. Was that before the podcast? Anyway, or they were close.
It's right about that time.
Happened close. But anyway, but I'd never been to like Montreal, and I've only ever been to four tracks out of the 60 tracks that have ever hosted races or something like that, right? Like, so I certainly can't have all this knowledge, but unless you're a professional, neither do you. And so I think that does open that space for new fans, and it certainly opens that space for women, because that's often the first barrier, is some guy who will always have that knowledge that I can't have because I can't play football.
Yeah, and it's a good point about F1 being, it's kind of a grand equalizer, right? In that sense, as a sport, because watching some of the content, there are legitimately some content creators that actually work in F1.
Sure.
So that's awesome. They've got great access. I've been in the paddock numerous times. I've had FIA creds numerous times. I've been in the media centers numerous times. That's a whole different experience than being able, that's a different thing. But even though we've done that, we've never presented the website or podcast as like insiders, like I'm a mechanic for Aston Martin.
And I think
that's not how I present it. We've always presented as This is a fan-driven. We
Yeah.
are fans of the sport, right?
And I think there's different levels, right?
Yeah, there are.
For sure. I'm not right. I have no insider knowledge like that.
It's like the what's the official F1.com? Is it Tom? What's his face that does the official podcast, right?
I don't know.
Tom. I'm sorry, Tom. I should know your last name. Anyway, Formula1.com has an official podcast,
Okay.
right? And
I don't even.
a guy named Tom does those.
I don't even listen to it, so I can't.
Right, I don't have time to either. But it's professionally done. You know, this is a guy that can pick up a microphone, walk into any paddock, and arrange to meet and interview any driver. Well, yeah, most of us don't have that access, right? So, but most of us are fans, and so to your point, F1 allows for fan commentary, which we have always been since 2005. We've never pretended to be F1 journalists, in there. I'm not the Adam Cooper of podcasting. Like I'm in there, interviewing Christian Horner and all that kind of stuff. I have talked to Christian Horner. It's tomorrow. I've talked to Gunther. I've talked to all of them. But
does yelling at you count as a conversation?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm counting it as a conversation.
All right, fair enough.
I should, what I should have said? I should have said, you've got a problem with your birthday. Change your effing birthday. Yeah. So
that joke
anyway,
really will never get old. So it's fine.
I know. So, but it's sort of a grand equalizer. Now, to that point, women have always been in and around motorsport. And the new DTS female fans are a great addition to the future fan base of the sport. Now, from an exhaustive run around all the socials, there are several sort of content creators. There's like one woman content channels. And then there's like several podcasts and other platforms hosting like 2 or more women discussing F1. They can be random thoughts about issues or deeper dives into the sport, drivers or politics of the sport. And I think that's great. Right. They cover a large interest level, just as all the other podcasts would, and varying levels of interest. Some of them get down into how do the wheel guns work, and then others get down to they're talking about fashion and girlfriends and stuff. And I think it's awesome. It's great. It's whatever they're interested in. Right. Some of these are fun. They're aimed at the basics of F1 to help other fans and female fans in particular get into the sport. And that's great. And I enjoy that. Others take a subject, do a deep dive into take a deep dive on it as a point of curious interest, right? An explanation, which is great. Some others are funny. Like I said, they're into fashion or girlfriends or their favorite team and driver, and then they're having a go at the competition. It's all good fun. Then there are others that I found that they're very bitter and angry. There's a very bitter and angry vibe to them that for me, that just makes them a lot less approachable due to the continual incessant complaints about veteran fans and gatekeepers. And, fair enough. It's your world, it's your platform. It's just not my thing, but, I'm not burying my head in the sand. It's just, as Grace said, I get my share of angry DMs and mail. I just choose not to give that stuff much oxygen, just like Grace said. It's output only at that point. I'm not interested in your haterade, and I'm not going to give it any oxygen, and I'm not going to reply because it serves no one, right? We can't please everyone, and we're not trying to. And while their anger may very well be just, I didn't see many signs of it in their comment sections, but I did have, on the upside, I did have some really nice interactions with several young female creators who are DTS fans, and they were perfectly delightful. And while their content, I would, from my perspective, I would argue was kind of topical, I engaged in that spirit. I wasn't in their comment section weighing in on their content, lording over them with my ultimate wisdom of F1 compared to theirs. I wasn't in there trying to make them look foolish because they didn't know Williams used water-cooled brakes as an excuse to cheat. That's not needed, and it's not the point of the original post. And I think for any veteran out there, maybe this is a helpful thing. I tend to try and meet the new fans where they are, then go from there. And I guess the lesson there is let them walk their journey through F1, not your journey through F1, right? Let them walk their journey. I've had a journey that's lasted decades long, but it doesn't do any good if there's a young woman who's Gen Z who has a TikTok account who's talking about pick something, a helmet or whatever, and then I come in and I'm all chest pounding 800-pound gorilla and weighing in. Well, but did you know blah blah. There's no room for this. It's pointless. It should be there saying that's a great point, and that's a lot of fun to talk about. Should be encouraging that kind of content because there's some of those TikToks have hundreds and thousands of likes, so people are enjoying the content. So don't be a jerk. And so that's how I try to do it. And here's the thing, Grace. Now, you're a woman.
I am. Yes.
You are. You're a woman who's been podcasting about F1 for 16 years.
Okay, in 2 more years, the website's already old enough to be in Formula One. In 2 more years, this podcast will be old enough to be in Formula One.
That's right. Podcast could drive in Formula One.
I'm just feeling the wrinkles.
There was something that I noticed, and I throw this out there, not to be systemic, but I throw this out there because I think it's interesting.
Okay.
A recurring theme that I saw that I found to be kind of true from what I've seen was with regards to female fans of whether it was NASCAR, IndyCar, F1 over the decades, is that they tend to be engaged in different things than their male counterparts. Not exclusively, but I did see a lot of that. It was a unique view of F1. What seemed to me to be the different angle of their content is that it was not so much about the what, but the why, right? And there were several posts from female creators explaining the whys, if you will, from their drivers or to fashion or to the race or to the race process or the incidents on and off tracks or the politics and the possible reasons for whatever they're talking about. Not that men don't care about the why, we do, but I really enjoyed that line of sight from the female creator content, specifically in TikTok, because and that goes back to really kind of, I was thinking about it as I was watching that, and I thought, that kind of goes back to 2005 when Grace joined, because I loved Grace's whys, right? On top of the whats, if you will. In fact, our entire podcast for 16 years has been focused on not just the what, but the why, right? And that's gained us the labels occasionally insightful. And, that's good enough for me as a fan. But like I said, I'm not saying it's a uniquely female thing. Guys, get into the what's too, but I just found that to be kind of an interesting commonality. There were a lot of focus on the whys more than the whats, and I thought it was kind of refreshing. It was kind of cool.
I as a sociologist, first of all, of course I'm interested in the whys. I wouldn't be a very good sociologist if I wasn't interested in the whys, right? I'd be something else. But I don't know. I do wonder if that is you can never separate nature and nurture, right? So you can never just say, because you can't, unfortunately, they frown on you raising feral children that you lock in your basement in order to tell the difference between nature and nurture, right? So I do think some of it is how men and women are socialized differently from each other and how they make connection. I think for women, understanding why is what builds rapport, right? Like I just tell you, well, here's what we're going to do, you're not going to be my friend, right? Because I really want to get to know you. I really want to build that bridge. I want to build that rapport. And the easiest way to do that is to why do you like, the Chiefs, Todd? Why you're in St. Louis? Oh, because that's where you were born. Oh, well, that's really interesting. That's how I am with the Steelers because I live in DC, but I'm originally from Pittsburgh. Look at that connection happening, right? So I wonder if some of that is because conscious or not, women are always kind of thinking about how can I build a connection? Because without that connection, what's this relationship? Whereas I think guys are much more, here's what I know, and that makes me better than what you know.
Right. Right.
And it's just kind of a different way we're socialized, and the different way men and women communicate, especially with other women and with other men. So I don't know. I think I don't know. I'm not on TikTok, but I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was, I don't know. It was just sort of a theme I started seeing, that a lot of the content was, they'd set the topic up, and then they would discuss why that was, and I just thought it was a different sort of fresh take on F1. And there's probably a host of primary, secondary, and tertiary reasons that the content is that way, because right now all of the DTS fans are new to Formula One. So there is a lot of questions about why are they doing that? And so wait a minute. So why are they getting rid of, tire blankets or why? So I think what they're doing, and maybe just, the female content creators that I looked at, maybe they're just really in tune with that. But I think for them, explaining the whys helped them understand the sport a lot better. And instead of getting into, oh, this is really cool, look at that, what,
right.
It's
look at how fast it's going. Yeah. I do think why also requires one to be humble, right? If I say to you, Todd, well, why is that? I'm saying, I don't know the answer. I don't know.
Right.
And I think that takes a lot of humility. I think in everyday conversation, I think we would all be in a better place if we were all just more willing to say, I'm sorry, my bad. And when it is when you should say that, right? Because some people just make it up. Yeah. Or, well, they like jump on the sword first, right? That's not really how it's supposed to work either, right? But when you really did make a mistake, saying you're sorry goes a long way. And then just saying, I don't know. I mean, your children were once young, but when my nieces were young, sometimes stuff would happen and I go, I just don't know, because they're 6, and like the answer is much bigger. And then maybe I just don't know, but that's what we're going to do today. And I don't know why that's what we're doing. And maybe we can figure that out and we can ask Mama later, because I don't know. Yeah. I'm just telling you that's what we're doing. So I just think that there's some space for that kind of humility that isn't easy always to find within any of us. So I'm glad to see that, because I do think that requires a level, but that's where the growth is, right? It is humbling myself to say, hey, Todd, I don't understand something. And you going, hey, Grace, here's this thing. And I go, oh, great. That's where the growth is. That's how we have community. That's how we learn things. So I hope that there is definitely a place for, wow, that car is really fast. Check out that thing. But yeah, I think tire blankets, tire warmers is a very interesting topic. I think that's something that's very controversial right now. Yeah. And that because they want to get rid of them, and a lot of the drivers, I know Lewis Hamilton's very vocal about not getting rid of them. Well, why the hell is that? Right? I think that's a very pertinent place for that kind of a why, because other sports don't use them. I drive in the snow. I don't have tire warmers. Why do they need tire warmers? Right? Like I see where those kind of like little things that, again, I think as a fan, I forget, or I don't know, because I never thought to ask that question. I've certainly had people ask me questions. I go, I don't know. That's great. That's a great question. Yeah. Let's go find out together. I never thought to ask that question. Yeah. It's funny.
So I will admit there were a few of, on TikTok, there were some young girls that were talking about F1. They were kind of like just reading headlines, but they were really kind of more thirst trapped than they were.
Well, guys certainly do that too. So,
no, I know. And speaking of the guys, I was going down and looking at a lot of the new guy, content creators and shows, and it was kind of an interesting dichotomy, for them. It was, talking about the what's and offering a lot of foul expletives and making broad generalized statements about motives and fully engaged in their bathroom humor and that kind of stuff. And then, a lot of what I saw with the guys, and I don't know, maybe this is just a generational thing, a lot of them have just this over the top energy, and they're like all bombastic personality. And I don't know, maybe it's just I'm old, but
No,
I learned a long time ago that
Mhm.
it's not always a good thing to be all personality and no character, you know?
Sure, but I still think there's a lot of space. I don't like that there's a lot of space for this, but kind of that morning zoo thing.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
And I
yeah.
think especially like, again, I think that's a lot of reasons why I never watched a lot of sports shows
No,
because
I
there's a
didn't
lot
either.
of like morning zoo. I don't. I just wanted to know if the Wizards lost last night, which they probably did. I don't need all this other stuff to go with it, right?
No, I didn't. I never listened to any of the morning sports shows and
But
stuff.
I,
And
I
people
still
used
think
to
it's
ask
out
me
there.
why, and it was just like it was very laddish, you know.
Yeah.
And it was a bunch, you know. And I kind of, and somebody said, "Oh, you don't listen to like the ESPN in the morning," or and no, it's like, you know, there's something about getting up, getting ready to go to work, and going to work, and then for 45 minutes listen to a bunch of penis jokes early in the morning. You know, I'm not
Yeah.
interested. You
No,
know,
right.
I'm really not interested. It's not my thing. Now, I'm not just picking on the guys. There were, like I said, there were a few
Yeah.
female creators that were more thirst trapped than they were F1 content, and there were a few out there that had this whole on the edge of rage screed and scolding, a group of oppressors and gatekeepers, and okay, it's very bitter, very angry. But I didn't read the entire internet, folks. Maybe that negativity and gatekeeping and just haterade and death threats and all this crap that people are claiming, maybe that's happening somewhere. If it is, I'd recommend just not hanging out in those platforms, channels, or websites. I mean, we chose to stop engaging and all of that crap and just simply create a safe harbor for the kinds of fans that you're reaching for. The kinds of fans, for us, when we did this, we were trying to cater to the kind of fans that we would like to have a beer with and talk about our favorite sport with, right? And, thankfully, Grace and I have actually done that on multiple occasions. There's lots of people who don't vibe with us, and that's okay. But the ones who do are the very people that Grace and I would love to sit down and have a beer with and talk about Formula One, right?
And I think there's been a lot of, because for a long time, again, I was thinking now this is normal. But back in the way back time, 16 years ago, people thought it was very weird that I did this podcast with you every week and I had never met you.
I know, yeah.
Now nobody would bat an eye at that concept, but it was just like, you do what? And he's how old?
Yeah.
I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah. I'm older than Grace, so yes.
That's true. It's also different when you're like 25 or something, and
Yeah.
now I'm old, you're old, it's fine, we're all old.
Yeah.
And so I think that people, it just is a very weird thing that you're like, yeah, but because I remember also in the early days, like I didn't have any friends that talked about Formula One, so I would just we didn't have texting back then, so I'd have to actually call
Right.
you on a phone, right? And
Right.
it was kind of like we should just record our phone calls, and that's how
Yeah.
it should be. I think this is a very genuine portray. Like I've definitely had people tell me that, right? Like
Yeah.
exactly how you're on the podcast. I'm like, yeah, I forget a lot of
She
things,
is.
just like I do on the
I
podcast.
don't know about forgetting, but no, you're the same in real life as you're on the podcast.
But I've made a lot of friends.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I've met a lot of people, whether it's when we went to Indy or if we've gone to races,
Right.
or even virtual friends. But they're people that I think I've made a connection with through this show and through a love for Formula One, and then that spawns into other things, right? Like
Right. Right.
So I think there is a real space for that too, and I just try to whatever. There are trolls in real life, as I was saying earlier. There are trolls on the internet, and I just try to I don't need that. That doesn't bring me joy. I don't need that.
Right. So I did have a couple caveats, and at the risk of undoing everything I'm talking about, I did have. So as someone who has sat beside Grace and Paul podcasting for over 16 years, I will say that I don't have a whole lot of patience when DTS fans start lecturing me on F1, telling me that I don't know anything about the sport. I need to go read a book. They're, all their bravado. And I don't have a whole lot of patience for that because I tend not to try to do that with them. And I kind of expect the same return. I had a DTS fan who had a large following that was invited to the paddock by a team, and then they were lecturing me in my DMs. And I get it, but I've been there. I've been invited to many races with many sponsors, many different teams. I've been there and done that before DTS fans even really knew F1 existed. So context is kind of important. If you want to get negative comments as a DTS fan, then the quickest way to do that is start insulting people or veterans who've been watching for quite a while and telling them they don't know anything about F1. They need to read a book and all that kind of crap. That just doesn't serve any purpose. And all you're doing is really just flaming that whole thing up. And there's no need for that. Look, these DTS fans didn't discover F1. It wasn't invented then. It's existed for decades before you. And veterans have their own F1 experiences and journeys and insight born from lived experiences, just as you will in another 20 years of being an F1 fan. You'll remember when Max won 2 titles and all this stuff, But
if I have to.
Yeah. If you don't want veterans gatekeeping or insulting your lack of knowledge, I think it would also be good to understand that, Googling an event and considering that done doesn't really replace, for those that actually sat, like I said, through the U.S. Grand Prix when there's only 6 cars or some of those lived experiences. Now, there was another element that I found kind of interesting, though, while they were talking about veterans and nasty veteran behavior and gatekeeping. One thing I did kind of find interesting was there were a lot of DTS fans jumping out in the lead as F1 content creator experts, and they were tending to lord over other new fans and was classifying, they're all oppressed by veterans, or, I have a unique wisdom, knowledge, and insight. And they were sort of like going back and forth at each other. And I thought, now that's interesting, because one of them in particular, I did see kind of a comment back and forth. And one of them was a new fan and admitted that and was trying to unpack the sport. And the other one was berating them a little bit. It wasn't too harsh. But the one that was sort of being negative, I went back to their social media profile and went back and saw the first time they ever mentioned anything about Formula One was like 3 years ago. So, they were a newer fan too. And I thought that was an interesting dynamic. Like I said, in the end, we all join a timeline at certain stages throughout history, and our lived experiences start there. So, while millennials and Gen Z certainly have an interesting relationship to each other, as they sort of battle it out and all that, just realize that you all joined F1's timeline a few years ago. And some joined that timeline, as I mentioned, when Fangio was racing, right? So veterans should respect that DTS fans joined in 2019, 2020, whatever it was. They're unpacking the sport. And I think DTS fans should also remember that veterans, it's not going to be unheard of that they know a thing or two about F1 that you may not know. They've just been watching for a long time. And either scenario is okay. It's okay to be a new fan to Formula One and to not have an encyclopedic knowledge of Formula One. But when you go on a screed and start berating veterans because you can Google it quickly, that's not the same, and veterans shouldn't dog on you for that. But yeah, it's all these variations on a theme, from the DTS. It's very complex, I found out. It shouldn't be. We should all just be fans who love Formula One. Some are newer than others. It should be that simple.
I guess. I mean, I don't know.
Don't you think?
I don't know. People enjoy telling you people enjoy telling other people what they should know. I've definitely had people tell me things and I'm like, I think I've been me long enough to know I'm not going to do that. So,
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I know what I want to do or want to wear or where I want to go on a date, or I don't know, maybe I have some insight to what I want to do, and you don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
I
maybe
don't
you
know.
don't.
I think some
Yeah.
people really just, that's their control, their superiority. That's the way they prove their worth. I don't know, but yeah, I've definitely run into those people that it's
Yeah.
well, I think I
Eh.
might know. I've
Yeah,
been me. I've been me longer than you've been me.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
I know what I want. Maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point. There was, if there is a new DTS fan, be it or a man or woman, and you're getting somebody in there, whether they're new fan lording over your veteran, doesn't really matter. But, you know, it's pretty infantile, really, and
Yeah.
it just be secure. It's to Grace's point. I think the point is, instead of being a new fan and having rage about it, I think instead of being a veteran and lording over people and denigrating people because they don't, I think everybody could be just a little more humble in this equation.
And I think because I think we've all probably experienced something like I was at training for work all day, and we started out with the icebreaker, who you are, how long you've worked for this organization, and a hobby. And it was interesting because if somebody said something like, oh, I like to read, that's my hobby, and somebody, oh, what are you reading? Like, you could instantly see, or if somebody's like, oh, I picked up crochet during the pandemic, and I'm like, oh, I tried to learn how to crochet, and I have I kept losing a stitch, and my square just became a pointy triangle. I'm like, I'd love to learn how. So I think that it's just a little bit, we're really all strangers until we become friends, and we're all just looking for that connection. And I anytime people are very quick to say social media is terrible, I think, but it's also been great. This wouldn't exist. All those people that I've met along the way, and that I've only met virtually, that I talk to all the time, I wouldn't know any of them. But it's now, I'm like, anytime I go some city for travel, there's somebody there that's like, oh, Grace, you're in my city. Let's go to dinner. Oh yeah, let's go to dinner. Right? Like, I think that there's so much to be gained from this connection, but it does have to start from a place of believing the other person. It has to start from a place of sparking joy in each other, and not me trying to show you how smart I am, because I am smarter than you, but I don't need to prove that to you all the time. So we'll just have a nice conversation. It'll be a fun time. And I just think there is that space, especially in a sport like this, in this country. 20 years ago, when I started watching this sport, where nobody knew anybody, and if I said, oh, I watch auto racing, it was like, we make fun of my JPM hat that I have, but it has a big number 3 on the brim. Now it's blue because he was with BMW, so it's blue, white stitching, big number 3 on the, and everybody's like, oh, that's a weird Earnhardt hat. Yeah, because it's not Earnhardt. Nope. Yeah. He doesn't own the number 3. Yeah. And it's not black, and it's not does it look like Goodyear? It's not. And so I think that coming from that, I really can never completely give up on this, internet, social media, because the only people I ever talked to about Formula One before we started this podcast was Steve Matchett and, the Speed Crew. That was the only people that I talked to the television.
Yeah, right.
Hobbs, I don't think you can say that out loud, right? Because who else was I talking to? It was, Bob Varsha and Steve Matchett and Hobbs, and that was it. Those are my friends that I watch Formula One with, and I think there's such a community out there now. So
that's the upside of it. You're right.
People need to keep that in mind, and that it's not a pie. It's not a pie. Just like everything else, it's not a pie.
Right.
If I'm friendly to another podcast, or I'm on there, you're going on other people's podcasts, or I listen to other people's podcasts, or, oh my God, I watch other sports too. It's not a pie. There's space for all of us. And there's just as much space for, that Corona as there is for that Guinness. Every beer can't be Guinness. Nobody wants that. And every beer shouldn't be Corona, because really nobody wants that. You need the whole broad spectrum of beers. Because your moods are different, or the environment's different, or people drink different things, and there's space for all of this beer, and I love it all. It doesn't, except for Budweiser, you're disgusting. You're right. But all the rest of it, you're fine. You're my friends, and I just don't. I just try to keep that, and try to not, when somebody comes at me, it's just like, All right, I'm just going to move on because there's enough people that I can interact with. I don't need that.
Yeah, I think
I don't know.
dwelling on the negativity, just rise above it. It's not,
Yeah.
stop giving it oxygen because, that's to your point. There's if you took 100 new F1 fans, you may be surprised out of the 100 all the various reasons that F1 appeals to them.
Yeah.
It's not all going to be the same. Not all 100 I'm going to say, I am absolutely enthralled by the paint schemes of the cars.
I didn't know how you were going to end that sentence. Toto Wolff. I don't know. I wasn't sure.
I just am enamored by Toto Wolff and everything he says.
Get down.
That's
everybody has a different reason,
Yeah.
and it's okay if a new fan to take a young teenager, Gen Z, and they're in it because they think Lando is really cute. Well, he is, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. It does bring up the last section I want to talk about is the veteran, because you and I, have been watching this a long time.
Yeah.
And so what we don't hear much about is what the veteran looks for. Now, if you're a DTS fan, know that the veteran fan has been watching for decades, and there wasn't a lot of growth and content created for us back in the day with like special features, and look at what Sky Sports F1 does now. They're broadcasting hours and hours and hours of content. You were lucky to get 3 races broadcast in America. Grace and I had to have subscriptions to Autosport, which is like $250 a year.
And you waited
and
like
Motorsport. You waited
7 weeks
forever.
until it came.
And it's a weekly, but I get it like 3 weeks later.
Yes.
And that was the only way, is even before the interwebs. So that was the only way you could get information. You had to actively spend a lot of money and go after it, which we did.
Or
but
spend hours in Barnes and Noble, which is what I did.
Which is it? Yeah, right. That's what you do. So, and I have people that send me links to sort of DTS fueled content, I'll say, and they'll ask me why I don't watch this. Oh, don't you watch this person? And if I'm honest, just being very candid with you guys, the content is very basic and uninteresting for me. All right. I've been watching for decades. So watching a YouTube or TikTok or podcast explained how qualifying works, I'm really not that interested. Or how tires work, or what teams do with tires when they're done with them. I already know that. I already know what they do with them. All right. So I'm not going to sit through that content. I'm just not going to.
They built a shrine to Enzo Ferrari. I'm pretty sure that's what they do with all the old tires.
No, they stack them in
right?
a big pile and set them ablaze. No, they don't. And so I already know that stuff. So as much as I appreciate that people are making that kind of content for seeker-sensitive, new fans and stuff, I'm not interested in that, because as a veteran, I already know that. If you've listened to any length of a time to this podcast, Grace and I scolded previous broadcasters for making every race broadcast like a seeker-sensitive show, constantly revisiting the basic tenets of F1 on every single broadcast. It drove us nuts. And at some point, if a new fan doesn't understand, then by God, they need to go look it up. Okay? The British Premier League football or soccer doesn't stop to explain what offside means every single damn time on every single match, so I can understand it. Or they don't talk about what a free kick and what constitutes a free kick every time there is one, right? And so from my perspective, stop explaining how qualifying works. Stop explaining how a virtual safety car works. It's tedious and it's frustrating. And I also think at this point, it belittles DTS fans and their ability to learn the sport and get on top of the nuances and appreciate it for what it is. At this point, I bet there's DTS fans themselves that are getting tired of hearing how qualifying is explained every damn race, right? Imagine being a veteran and hearing that for 300 times. I mean, it's nauseating. So in my mind, if I had just a slight suggestion to Formula One, is that just like the football broadcast or soccer, The broadcast should be developed for seasoned F1 fans, while the social media content and all of the creators should be the people who unpack the sport, right? You want to learn about how qualifying works, you go to YouTube and watch a video on it, right? You want to learn how a team does this, you go to Red Bull or Ferrari's social media or YouTube page or whatever. And there's so many people creating how things work and why and pit lane process and aerodynamics, and there's so much content out there that new fans can go harvest, that they have access to, that they can learn a tremendous amount about the sport. But the broadcast itself shouldn't be tedious. That's at least my thought from a veteran standpoint. What say you, Grace?
Okay. One, this is like the Olympics coverage, which we've also talked about before, because if you ever participate in a sport that is covered by the Olympics, it's the same problem, because they just speak to the lowest common denominator. They treat everybody as if you've never watched the sport before.
Right.
And I never took gymnastics. That was not my thing as a kid. But I have a good friend who used to be a professional gymnast. And to watch with her, it was fascinating, because she's like, I don't even know why they're talking about that. That's not even germane to this point. But it's and the thing is it's always somebody who's very knowledgeable, right? It's some name you know. And so then it's like, it's disappointing, because you're like, oh, I really like this person. They're such an expert in this field, and this is what they're talking about. But it's because it's what they're told to talk about. They're told to talk about it as if we're all 2-year-olds, right? So I'm agreeing with you is what this is. So I think that a lot of Sky, which is what we get, is very much that like Olympics lowest common denominator kind of explanation of things.
It's becoming more that now that America gets its feed, and they seem like they're kind of dumbing it down a little bit.
Yeah, and again, my biggest pet peeve from last season will continue this season. If I feel like I should drink every time Crofty especially says, is it going to be a 2-stopper or a 3-stopper? No shit, there's no other option. Nobody's doing 4-stoppers unless you're Alpine, right?
Right.
Nobody,
right.
Orlando, right? Like nobody means to do more stops than that, and nobody can do less than 2 stops. So like, I don't, or it's a 1-stopper or a 2-stopper, right? Like that's every race. You can stop saying that. They have to stop at least once, and nobody means to stop more than 3 times, right? Like, so most people stop once or twice, and that's it. So but you can stop saying that. And so I agree. I do find it annoying, but I do appreciate that F1 especially does a lot of that kind of extra coverage. Like I always liked back in the old days, the Steve Matchett Chalk Talks, right?
No,
because
those are great.
Right. It was the same idea that if you didn't care, and I didn't watch all of them because somebody was like, I don't care about tires. I'm not watching that. But then it would talk about some like inside radiator part that I can't see with my eyeballs. I'm like, well, that's interesting. I'll watch that. Right. Yeah. So I do think, or something like Scarps, there's a lot of content that is specific to what level you want. Because
that's what I'm saying.
I think there's a lot of space for that. And so again, back in the speed days, if it wasn't carried on speed, I couldn't know it. That is not the case now. You don't have to try to cover everything in your 2-hour broadcast. So let it go.
I agree.
I agree with that. I think the other thing is I learned the most about football from playing the tutorial to Madden. So I guess that same thing must exist in the Formula One racing game. Just play that. F1 Manager has been fascinating in that same sort of way that you have to think about things in a way you didn't before. But yeah, the tutorial on Madden is the best way to learn football. So because I didn't understand, I watch football all the time, but I didn't understand the nuance. Well, that really helped.
Yeah.
And then I think my biggest point about veterans is they don't care because they already have our money. They don't have to cater to us.
Right.
We're going to watch. Crofty can say every week, is it a 1-stopper or a 2-stopper? And guess what? I'm still going to keep watching. So he's going to still keep saying it because he doesn't have to worry about not that he's worried about my money, but he doesn't have to worry about my money. It's already been spent. They already have it. I'm not a male 17 to 25, right? So they're always going to cater to that younger demographic, the new fan, because that's where the money is.
Yeah.
Not me.
Yeah. Right. No, it's true. But if you, that's just my 2 cents, folks.
I agree.
As a veteran, it gets tedious as hell. It really does.
Well, they're changing up qualifying this year, so now you won't have to worry about being at the tedium. It'll be a new level of tedium.
There's a new level of tedium.
Now they're involving tires, because what's more fun than talking about tires?
I know. Even Ted Kravitz now is so sheepish when he has to talk about tires. He hates talking about it.
Sorry, I have to talk about tires. He does. He apologizes every time.
He does. He apologizes because in the reality of it is that, that shouldn't be. I mean, it's always a factor, of course. Racing tires are literally critical, but
where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah, it's critical, but it shouldn't. Therefore, depending on how aggressive Pirelli got it, there were seasons where it was really the tire Grand Prix. I mean, it didn't really matter.
Say, that's part of it too. Is that, I mean, when did Pirelli become the single source? That's been a long time now.
A long time, yeah.
It's just like refueling. How many people are listening to this going refueling? Why do you guys always laugh about Massa? Why is that funny, right?
Because he dragged a fueling rig down the pit lane in Singapore 2008. Yeah.
Yes, because I'm old. That's why.
Right.
But yeah, like the golden days of refueling and tire competition.
Right.
But yeah.
So with all that being said, look, I'm not trying to pick a scab between millennials and Gen Z, but because true to our generation's form, I'm Gen X. I don't really give a damn.
I was just gonna say, but I'm Gen X. You all suck. I don't care.
Yeah, I don't care.
Fine.
The thing that classifies is our astounding level of indifference, right? I don't care. Shut up. Go away.
Whatever. I don't care. Do what you want.
But just know that if you are new to the sport, that's what the Parc Fermé was created for, is intended by. And if you come to the Parc Fermé, I am almost 100%, maybe 92% certain that all of the veteran listeners and readers and commenters at the Parc Fermé will not flame or troll you, because there's no personal attacks there. And most of us, and there's people who have been watching Formula One a long time that have listened to this podcast for years, right? And they're all really, really good people. I meet them. They send me DMs and messages. They're great people. I have our listeners send me links all the time. I didn't see them. Am I offended because I've been watching Formula One longer than they have and I should? No, I don't care. I can't read everything. I don't see everything. And the reason they send me those links, I absolutely adore that, because I miss that stuff. And sometimes I've seen it already, and that's fine. That's okay. I just say, hey, I saw that. That's awesome. But that's, everyone just needs a more of a collegial spirit about this, and to stop, getting so damn offended and angry and bitter. It's not that big of a deal.
Unless it's Paul, I'm totally continuing to troll Paul.
Oh, absolutely. You troll Paul. He deserves it. All right. Let's do some Albin's Cats. Shall we?
Yes.
All right. You got any Albin's Cats?
Of course I do.
Excellent. Hit me.
We had a race.
Yes, we did.
Magic Alonso 08.
Alonso 08.
I told you. I was just 15 years too early.
You were. I know, but you were calling it.
There you go. It was just a matter of time before it came true. I'm just glad it happened before he retired. So
right.
Alonso 08. I was pretty stoked for sure. I do also love that people are like, "Oh, he's so salty. I don't like him." I'm like, that is why I like him.
Yeah, Grace likes him because he's the anti-hero.
Exactly, right? I love me some Alonso. And then because they were talking about how, he was talking about, because Lance Stroll, right, had his bike accident.
Yeah.
And, he made the comment that he had once driven a race with like a broken hand or something. And somebody on Twitter was like, I think he meant that as like a supportive comment, but I can't help it. Every time Alonso says something, I expect it to be like a backhanded jab of some sort. I'm like, right, exactly. That's what I thought too.
Yeah, I know. Well,
I love him. So yeah, Magic Alonso was pretty excited for that.
Yeah.
Alpine was looking as sad as I predicted. So I think they will unfortunately continue to be sad. That's not new. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm happy to not talk about McLaren. That may continue for some time. Apparently this season, not going to be so great. So yeah, and I think to me what I enjoyed the most was that when we did, the podcast, the three of us a while ago, we were talking about how long, and because Alonso was saying all these very loving things about Lance Stroll, and we're like, how long is that going to last? Esteban Ocon, that he was just like, 12 races and he was like, he tried to kill me and now I hate him, right? Like, how long is this love between him and Lance going to last? And it was like not even half a lap, apparently. And I just love that the team strategy was just to not tell him it was Lance that hit him.
Wasn't that
Don't
great?
worry about it. Just keep driving. We're going to
look
talk.
into it.
We'll find out. We'll find out who it is. You just keep running your race. Don't worry about it. We'll find that guy should be. We're gonna go call them. We're on it. I love that it was just like they just didn't tell him, and Lance was very aware of that when they interviewed him on Sky at the end. I was just like, does he know yet? Has Lance seen Alonso? Like, do they know? Does he know it was him? So I love that. That kind of like, it's a team that really gets Alonso. Just work with it. Yeah. Just keep telling them, just keep driving. We're working on it. We'll find out. We're not going to find out because we know it was your teammate.
Yeah, so, that was hilarious.
That was great. I love that. That was my favorite part of the race. And so I did have some non-race related Albon's cats. I did want to mention we were kind of talking about this. This is a nice segue. So friend of the show, Steve Matchett, actual friend of the show, unlike Dominicali, who I mockingly say is a friend of the show. Steve Matchett, actually a friend of the show.
He is.
So he has a YouTube channel, and so he did a really interesting video. I assume it was recent, but who knows? It could be old. But anyway, so he's at Haas's factory, and he talks about the aerodynamics of the car. But first of all, I like that Steve always has a nice level to it. Like, it's not, I don't need an advanced degree to understand, like, it's not race car engineering. I don't need to really like have that level. I'm not an engineer, but he explains it in a way that I'm like, oh, this is interesting and I get it, right? But it was really cool too, because he's able, by standing next to an actual car, he's able to like, and then the air goes in here, like he's able to like show you how things work, because he's not, Scarbs just has to draw pictures, right, around like, here's the inlet and over here's the squiggly bit. But so it was kind of cool that Steve's able to like, get down and like show you around the car, like how,
because he's Steve F and Matchett.
Yeah. So it was really great. So I highly recommend that. If you are interested in kind of how the aerodynamics of a car work, it was a gregreat video. So
and even if you're not interested in that, you should watch, because it's Steve Matchett.
Well, that's true too. But I do think, there's all that, this goes back to the always preaching to lowest common denominator. There's like some fear about talking about the cars that I don't understand. It's racing. Do I want to talk about, again, race car engineer level of the cars? I don't, because I'm not an engineer and I don't understand that. But I do need to understand why we put this squiggly bit here and this other squiggly bit over here, and how that all works together, right? Like, it isn't a stick and ball sport. I have to kind of understand the car.
Right.
That's part of this. So I think that you can talk about the car in a way that isn't like, I don't know, or like why the wings are different shapes, or why at different tracks they run different wings. It's not that complicated, but it does take some physical, whether it's a drawing or a picture or an actual car, to kind of like point at things and touch things to kind of get what each squiggly bit does and how this all works. And
yeah, I agree.
Really very cool. So I thought Steve did a great job. Somebody that didn't do a great job is Formula One's TV. So they always have in the corner, especially during qualifying, but they do during the race too. There's like that little track map with the little colored dots on it. Mm-hmm. There are too many blue and green teams this season. What the hell colored dot is this? Who is that? If it's not labeled, it could be Alonso, it could be Hamilton, it could be a Haas. I don't know. What color is that dot? So if they do let an 11th team in, you need to be like an orange. Well, but not orange, because we have an orange dot.
Papaya,
You need to pick a dot that color's not taken. It's just like the three initials have to be unique. Yeah. These colors are too similar, and I can't tell an Alpha from a Haas, and that's a problem as well. Like,
it's like I'm done with this. It's like, ooh, the answer is it's off yellow. When he guesses yellow, he goes, ooh, close. It's just thinking off yellow.
Yeah. So I think, but those dots, I'm just looking at this map, and that it really matters in qualifying in a way it doesn't in race. But I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know who's in turn 2 right now. That could be any of 9 cars right now.
I know.
That are that color.
So true.
They need to fix that. And then I was like, one last thing. I said in the last podcast that Michelle Yeoh was tall. She's not tall at all. She's only like 5'2". I think that just speaks to how not only short Jean Todt is, but that this is a whole new level for short guys.
Yeah.
Like he makes her look, now she does wear heels often, right? And so she probably is taller, but I didn't realize she was that short. So first of all, congratulations, Michelle Yeoh, for winning an Academy Award.
Yeah, sure.
Jean Todt, you two are the cutest people ever. And I love that. And, you know, I always think it's funny because he's always wearing his little scarf everywhere.
I know.
And she's like in this like short sleeve gown.
I know.
You're in California. Why are you wearing a scarf? But we all remember the days of him being at like, they'd be like, and here we are. And it's like 90 degrees outside. And there's Jean Todt in his red sweater. Right? Like, why are you always wearing so much clothes? It's hot outside, man.
And the tape over his fingernails. So
so we need them.
Yeah.
So I thought, you know, Jean Todt just, you know, you could be working this because that's a lot of short guys have, you know, issue with, you know, women won't date them because they're short. You just make them look taller. I really thought Michelle Yeoh was tall.
Yeah, he's a diminutive Frenchman.
She is not. So, but yeah, congratulations to those two and for being adorable and being, you know, the supportive spouse that you are, Jean Todt.
Yes, I agree.
Adorable.
You ready for no shit headlines?
I'm ready.
All right. First up, Alfa Romeo's Mystery F1. Wait a minute. Alfa Romeo's Mystery F1 2023 launch floor was a total fake.
It's false. No way. Not this time. We created it. Not this time. No, not this time. It's totally made up. Pure fiction.
Pure fiction.
It's fiction.
It's fiction.
It's fiction. We made it up.
Made it up, Grace.
It's a made-up tale.
It's a total
tale. Fabrication.
It's a total fabrication, Grace.
What? I do love this. It's related to floors, not Alpha's floor, but I love that teams now, like, I don't know, it's a visual, like the plane of your floor has to be to here. So they just put like a little metal string on the outside so it looks like it's longer, like so that it meets the regulations of it being a certain length. Like there's just, string isn't the right word, but like I don't, like a metal rope, I don't know what the word is, but I love that this is showing up on all the cars so that you can have the floor size you want but still meet the regulations. It's just always pushing the I love that's my favorite part of the beginning of the season is like, and then when the you know, the team principals are like, so just asking for a friend, but have you looked at Christian Horner's car? Because I might put that on my car, and I just wanted to see what you thought before I spend all the money on it.
Right.
Right. For sure.
Let's see. Next no shit headline is this. Alpine doesn't know true pace after troubled Bahrain weekend.
Hey, what happened?
Really? Yeah.
No crap, man. You had like 17 pit stops. I don't think you know what you're doing.
No, that was brutal.
That was terrible. Super sad. Super sad Alpine.
Let's see. Oh, this one. I like this one. Next one. I didn't marry Jerry because she was a Spice Girl. She's a force of nature who calls me out, says Christian Horner.
What are you, a wizard, a genius? Why didn't you tell me that before?
I love it.
Yeah, she called him a jerk face.
You know, you don't have to watch her very long to see that she's, you know, an extrovert, very dynamic, and there are some similarities between the two of them, right? Like I can see why this works. Yeah. And this one is in the sad category. Oh. This one's brutal.
Oh, this is super sad. Yes.
Yeah. So look, everybody knows I give Eddie Everywhere a hard time. Mohammed bin Salem. But his son just died in a car crash.
That was terrible.
It's terrible. FIA president's son dies in car crash in Dubai. So, you know, look, Eddie, no offense. I mean, our deepest condolences to you and entire family. That is just gutting. Cannot believe that happened. So, yeah, that's horrible news. Yeah. And on that note, we end the podcast, Grace.
Wow.
I know we unpacked a lot of stuff. I talked more about Drive Survive than I should have, but I just got on this thing. No, let me caveat this whole thing by saying those are just some observations I made, some thoughts I had, some thoughts Grace had about the thoughts I had, and some thoughts Grace had independently and my thoughts about hers. But what really matters is I'm very intrigued on what you guys think. The listeners and or / readers or / watchers, because it is an interesting conversation about it. And let's say you have, 1,000 seasoned, weathered, grizzled Formula One fans that have been watching years, and then 8,000 new fans come in, and everybody's like, what the hell's going on, So let us know what you think about this topic, because it seems to be a hot topic people are talking about. So let us know. You can do that by going to theparcfermé.com and share your opinion. Just remember, one rule, decorum and civility, no personal attacks. Disagree all you want. Doesn't require a personal attack. Grace can disagree with me and still not call me a cotton-headed ninny-muggins. If you like the podcast, you can go over to iTunes and give us a good rating, or on your favorite social or podcast player platform, and give us a little love over there. Appreciated. A huge thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. We could not and would not do this without you. Right, Grace?
That's right.
Yeah.
I was just going to tell you not to eat the gum. It's not free. Don't eat it.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Only the sun. Only, what's the saying? Only the sun rises for free. Right. Yeah, thank you to our Patreon supporters.
Absolutely.
And we will be back in a week's time. I will scare up one Paul Charsley, who is going to be fresh off of the 12 Hours of Sebring.
Oh, is that this weekend?
Yeah, it's this coming weekend.
All
so
right,
Paul's going to be racing at Sebring, folks. Watch The Heart of Racing, number 27 and number 23, Aston Martin. That's Paul's team. And speaking of, I don't know if anybody followed it. We were talking about women motorsport fans. Paul is the sporting manager of that team, and he just got done doing a whole women driver search and program, and they hired a couple of them. And they're in great hands with Paul as far as driving and coaching and all of that sort of thing. Paul is awesome at it. Anyway,
it's like he did that for a living or something,
Yeah, it's almost like he's driven race cars or something.
Right, he knows what he's doing.
It's funny about him.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. Well, until that time, we'll be back next week to do it all over again. Until that time, this is Todd, aka Negative Camber, saying so long, Grace.
See you in 2 weeks.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.